Welcome to the Meria Heller Show, on the net since 2000 and still going strong. If you feel like you're not getting the real news, if you feel like you're not connected spiritually, you have found your home. Meria covers a wide range of topics as only a snarky New Yorker can. Straight up, no chaser. No censorship, no corporate sponsors, thus true freedom of speech. Your subscription gives you unlimited access as a member of the smartest audience on earth. Relax and enjoy the education. Now here's Meria.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. Welcome to Tragedy and Hope with my excellent friend and co-host, Richard Grove, the one and only. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Meria. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I was thinking about all those years ago when I met you, since you and I talked before the show, and I was saying how long Dave McGowan was a co-host on my show. And I said, well, you're at about 12 or 13 years now.
Yeah, it's been a long time, since 2006. I think it's coming up 13 years anniversary would be Memorial Day this year.
Right. I was like, wow, all these years, time flies when you're having fun. But one thing that I was remembering after we hung up this morning was when I first met you, physically met you in Chicago. And, at that point, I knew you were one of the smartest young men I would ever meet in my life. And all these years later, looking at how your body of work has developed and how you've developed, the man you've become, not that you weren't a man then, I'm not surprised by it. Okay, I'm awed. I'm actually awed by it because I didn't think you could get any smarter or better at what you do when I first met you, and then here you are.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my work from 13 years ago, sometimes it makes me cringe a little bit. I'm like, oh, I was, a little rough and unpolished and a little bit nescient, a little bit ignorant, and a lot naive. And it's been a very rewarding journey, but it's all been off the beaten path. And I say sometimes, sometimes you get on that road off the beaten path, because you got beaten off the path, the super highway that they offer you, right? So it's only through making some untraditional decisions and kind of taking some calculated risks that turned out to be not so good calculations, because you need all the variables to calculate those risks. It's been a great adventure. It's been very rewarding, and a lot more memorable people I've met in the past 13 years than in the 13 years prior to that.
All right.
So...
do you ever think, though, to yourself, how different would my life be if I didn't wake up?
Well, it's hard to go through your entire life with as obvious as they make things now and not wake up to there's something a little bit different going on, and the territory is not reflective of the map we've been given. So if you're paying attention at all, I think you are starting to gather the critical mass to wake up, but eventually there'll be a point and things will click, and you'll, finally catch a contradiction that a politician says, or you'll catch something else that doesn't make sense in some official story or research or new finding, or you'll get, something that gets your brain going. And that's the invitation to learning that I think a lot of people's brains have been waiting for. Mm-hmm. So that's why when someone has their quote unquote wake up moment through whatever subject matter, they feel younger. They feel they have more vitality because their brain is doing the thing that it's created to do. Learning is fun, but if we go through a system that teaches us to think we know everything about everything, we don't ask questions anymore, and we just assume we have answers, then that leads to a lot of, unrealized dreams and unsatisfactory living if you ask the people who live that type of lifestyle.
Exactly. Well, listen, I've always been that kind of kid who liked to learn, and I still like to learn. I mean, to me, you even the day you die, you didn't learn everything you came here to learn, okay? And I have always wanted to know everything about everything. So it's hard for me to understand people who choose to stay willfully ignorant. And just a simple example. One of my friends asked me to ask my naturopath, about whether the the therapy I went through was available in Colorado Springs. Now, the truth of the matter is, all she had to do was go to Google, and she would have picked up, there's a million naturopaths doing prolotherapy in Colorado Springs. But people still don't want to get that it's up to them to do their own homework, but they still want everyone else to do it. And I think that's how people fall into these paradigms, whether it's political, religious division, whichever, just because they want someone else to tell them what to do.
And that's a recent occurrence. It's a recent occurrence. It hasn't always been like that. It hasn't always been like that in this country, as an example. So what you're observing, that's the symptom. And then if we had to put a name on the symptom, you could call that provisional self-esteem and or learned helplessness. There's two factors there. There's the part where they're not going to get self-esteem unless they're like doing something they're told, because that's how they get their self-esteem, by obeying orders, and that leads back to the learned helplessness. You don't know how to learn anything on your own because you're waiting for someone to tell you how to do or what to do, right? Instead of learning, oh, I need to become informed on this subject. How do I do that? Oh, I have a method I call upon. I do this, this, and this. And then I don't have to go over there and be ignorant or nescient and take actions without knowing what's going on. So in that circumstance, it just is something as simple as finding a naturopathic physician, which is, so to define that for the audience, an allopathic physician goes through the traditional medical school and would treat you in a hospital. A naturopathic physician goes through a medical school, but instead of treating you with pharmaceutical drugs, he or she is going to prescribe usually nutrients, foods, maybe exercise, things that actually are going to help your body, because the allopathic medicinal practitioners are not schooled about nutrition and health overall. They're more of addressing symptoms with pre-packaged products made by pharmaceutical companies, right? So there's like two different markets there. So if you're looking for the allopathic market, just go to a hospital. If you are into having a health and nutrition-based treatment system to be proactive, or to stimulate growth and healing from food, then you got to learn how to do some things yourself, because you're already off the beaten path. The beaten path is you don't need to know anything. Go to a hospital and somebody in a white lab coat will tell you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Well, it's another way of giving your power away.
Yeah, I mean, for people to expect they can be healthy in today's world without learning to think for themselves how to identify what food is and what food isn't. I mean, for example, my wife Lisa went to the grocery store, a different grocery store yesterday, because she was someplace else in town. So she stopped at this place they call Trader Joe's. And I know Trader Joe's because when I lived in Virginia 20 years ago, Trader Joe's just was opening stores down there. Now it's finally come to Connecticut. She went there, she came home, she said, there are no GMOs in the store. There aren't, like, you don't have to look what's GMO and what's not GMO. They just don't even put it in the store. Which I thought was a really cool marketing idea, because if you want real food, that's what it would look like, right? So
I gotta tell you, we don't have a Trader Joe's in my town, but every time I go down the hill, as they call it, to the valley, I hit Trader Joe's all the time. I begged the people running my town to put a Trader Joe's in this town, but it's a closed off fascistic little town, so it's never going to happen. But yeah, that's part of being responsible, besides the fact that they're less expensive than other grocery stores, and you know what you're buying, and they've got a great assortment of organic food. So there's a free plug for Trader Joe's.
I was just going to say, I haven't set foot in one since like the last century, but now I'm going to probably have to go there, because when I do go to the grocery store, it's probably worth the extra, 5 minutes? It's only 5 or 7 minutes further than the other one.
Well, in an act of...
A total of 14 more minutes. I could probably save that. If I calculated the time in the other grocery store, I have to avoid, where's the GMO food, where's the non-GMO food, right? That probably adds up to the extra minutes I travel,
Well, in an act of defiance and protest, just another little small thing that I do, like putting a postage stamp upside down on my mail when I send my bills to show we're in distress. I buy the reusable bags that say Trader Joe's all over them, and I take that into my Safeway every time I go shopping. So, there are ways of, making little silent protests. and
Yeah.
feeling good about yourself.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's necessary to, because there are a lot of people that go out and do non-silent protests, and I don't always see those as being the most efficacious way to take action, right? Because action usually starts, those types of actions are going on because communication skills between individuals are absent. So therefore, they have to argue in large groups against each other, and you see how that always ends up like in civil war.
Exactly, and that's
That's a
why I
divide and
don't.
conquer.
That's why I don't.
So it
I
gets
don't
back
go.
to people who would have seemingly opposing positions, right? Right now, politics is super polarizing. But most of the people who are arguing about politics, guess what? They have a lot in common. And if they took a few minutes to just figure out what they had in common before they had to talk about politics, it's like there are people who want guns, there are people who don't want guns. Guess what they all want? They all want their families to be safe. They all want their families not to be, plundered, pillaged, raped in situations where people do that to people without any defenses, right? So if there was some way that made personal protection much safer and less lethal or something like that, then fine. But until then, you have to recognize that people all have the right to protect themselves, and some people want to do it different ways. Some people, if you grew up in a city, you're used to having the police protect you, if you think that's how that works, right?
Right.
But if you grew up in a rural setting, you used to, if you're in the woods and there's a wild animal that's threatening your life, you're not waiting for the police to come save you. You probably go out there prepared to deal with wild animals that want to take your life, right? So there's various situations, and people are all too ready to just engage with the polarization because it's like Schadenfreude. It's this German word that means taking pride and pleasure in other people's downfall, right? So there's a lot of that today, and I just have to ask, like in the absence, like if that were absent, what would people be doing with their time, right? Could people be figuring out and catching up? It's like there's a lot of things going on in the world. Several people might be at the point where like all these politicians, I don't even understand how they get in office, and they say maybe I want to run for like local whatever, and start having a say in the world that might be more tangible in their local area. Because you can't do anything about the circus sideshow thing that's shown on all the TVs. It's really not our game. We're not connected to it. Our votes don't bring those people into the picture. Those people are brought into the picture, and they say the votes match up, right? So there's a whole bunch of things, and I think it comes from learning what we can influence and control, and then learning what we can't. It's like there's a lot of things in the world I can't control. Guess what? I'm not going to give my time, energy, attention, and focus to those things.
Right.
Right? It's not that it's not tempting to get online and say all sorts of things and be like, ha ha, other side, you're wrong. Like, I'm sure those thoughts occur to me. I just don't fuel them. I don't give them energy. I don't give them attention. I don't give them time. I don't let them sit still. I make sure those thoughts keep going because I got things I want to do. And if you're focused and you have goals and you actually have those goals tied into your priorities and your priorities tied into your dreams and where you want to be in life and where you want to go in reality as a function of your life, then I think you're a lot less able to be distracted, at least so easily. And for a lot of people, we could look at it as they're making the choice, but I argue they're not making choices because there's not, like they're doing things, but those things are just being offered to them, and they don't have other options that would like deviate off that super highway of dumbing down information, right? So if they chose to like, wait a minute, instead of this next, new video game or this new Netflix series, what else could I be investing my time in that might pay me off down the road and be an asset as opposed to these things that are kind of trivial and their liabilities? And there's a lot of people these days getting their time sucked up by video games, virtual reality, and online streaming media that is not helping them learn how to do the next step on their way to the goal to meet their priorities and realize their life dreams. Right?
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is people don't realize how much they're whipped around, just like, Pavlov's dog. By every day there seems to be a new bell ringing. Here's what you're going to pay attention to today. Here's what you're going to fight about today. Here's what you're going to hate about today. And it's just a waste of time. But people don't realize that. It's kind of funny because the other day somebody had said to me, geez, I don't even remember who. Well, as you know, I told you before the show, I just listed my house um, for sale. And my realtor asked for my cell phone number. And I said, I don't have a cell phone. Well, what do I do if, we want to show the house? This is you leave a message and just leave it on my machine. And it still stymies people that I refuse to carry a cell phone. But it's
Right.
more important for me to be alone in the quiet of my thoughts or singing along with my tunes when I'm driving down the highway than to be interrupted by the world.
You can put your cell phone on mute or silent.
Yeah, but then you got the tracking device too, so that doesn't make me too happy since I don't want to be targeted like some of my ex co-hosts. So if they're
Yeah,
gonna try to if they're gonna
you
try
gotta
to
get one
kill
of those
me, I'm
phones where
gonna.
you take the battery out, yeah, and put it in a foil bag.
Well,
Keep
you
it in your
used to be
microwave.
able you used to be able to do that. A long time ago, I had a couple of 9/11 experts come to my house. We were all going to talk about 9/11 and the work they were all doing, prior to doing some shows. And this was a long time ago. This was about 15 years ago. But they were all not only super paranoid, but also super smart because in those days you could take the battery out of your phone.
Hmm.
And they had all taken the batteries out of their phones and they had all disconnected whatever tracking they had on their vehicles. That's how paranoid they were. And yet, while we were sitting in my backyard, some kind of light ray was shot between two of us sitting on a chair. Now, we all saw it, so we moved inside. But today, the way they figured out the phones, even when it's off, it's on. And that's not like I have, what I'm talking about or whatever, although I'm sure I'd be arrested for sedition. But to me, it's just a distraction. Even my home phone is a distraction. Life is to live, okay? And everybody seems chained to so much of this that they're missing out on living.
Yeah, and I think that's an intentional part of the technocratic culture that they're bringing about. And this has been a plan that theirs for a long time. I made a production in 2010 called What You've Been Missing, and in there was a Microsoft commercial where everybody was looking at their new smartphones and tripping all over each other and getting hit by cars and basically dying because they can't break the attention of the smartphone. And I said in 2010, I'm like, this is not just an ad that's clever. This is them projecting the future. This is how attached people will be to these devices. This is what they're looking to do, right? So that's going on. So what do we do about it? Do we all get rid of our cell phones, or do we start to just say, look, the cell phone is a portal for attention, and maybe we're going to put our attention over here on something that's structured that benefits us, and stop giving our attention away as a liability. And that's all people really have to do. They're already like everyone has the same amount of time in a week. There's 168 hours. So
Right.
let's say 10% of your time you're doing entertainment that leads to nothing tangible in your life. It just sucks your time, whether it's video gaming or streaming media that's kind of just nonsense and not in line with where you want to be. And if where you want to be is where you are, that's cool. And have all the entertainment you want. But most people, if you ask them, they're using entertainment to numb the fact that they're not where they want to be in life and doing the things they want to do and traveling with the friends and having the family events or whatever. So let's work on that. So the way you do it is you take 10% of your time and you reappropriate it, right? The rest of your time, you do whatever you want. But if you take 10% of your time and reappropriate it for something that's going to help you directly reach your goals, that's going to positively affect the other 90% of your time. And when your work's not going right or your relationship's not going right or any of these things are just off, that's not just that situation. It bleeds all over your schedule for the week, right? Just like if you don't like your job, you're spending 40 hours a week at least at this job you don't like. So how's your home time? Probably a little stressful, not too happy, probably a lot of entertainment. And then how's your sleep? Not going as well as it could be. So like just how you misappropriate small part, like a third of your day, affects the other 2/3 of your day, right? So there's a lot of these cases and people just get into a recurring loop where it's just going on and on. And it's like Groundhog Day. The way you break out of that, because that cycle is not going to end itself, they're self-perpetuating it from the status quo. Like the establishment wants people to not be thinking for themselves. They want them to be dependent. They want them to be easily guided by what they see on TV, which brings it back to another point. Once upon a time, I didn't watch a lot of news, and then I was like, I need to know everything, so I was watching all the news channels. And I was like, that's a waste of time. I need to read more books. But then I was like, I don't feel like I'm keeping up with politics. I need to check back into that. So there's been an ebb and flow of my attention on mainstream media for a variety of purposes. Like at the beginning, 20 years ago, I was like, I need to watch it so I know what's going on in the world. And things go on in the world that don't match up with what's on TV. Then I'm like, wait a minute, I need to find out how that media works.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, they're up to no good. So let me keep track of them real quick. But what I've noticed is the past, since November probably, it's almost 6 months at this point, I have not watched any mainstream media, TV, news clips, politics, any of that stuff, not even on YouTube, not even in Colbert Report or some sort of clip show. I just haven't, and guess what? My goals are progressing. My life is on a track where I'm happy with where it is and where it's going and how fast it's moving. So it just seemed like a bunch of dead weight and baggage that was taking up a bunch of my time and attention. And more importantly, then I would try to talk to other people about that stuff. And instead of like actually asking them how they are and what their problems are and how it might help and these sort of things that you do in friendships and relationships, right, we're talking about a bunch of stuff, or even sometimes people are arguing about these topics. Like when I get together with friends, sometimes instead of actually talking about each other and what they can do like for themselves and locally, they're worried about aspects of the world that don't infringe on them, like don't have anything to do with like their daily anything. And that even if they were to come to some decision on this, nothing happens. So I had to ask them because, there's people on Facebook battles and I'm like, what are you guys getting out of this? Like, let's say you win. What happens then? Let's say he wins the argument. What happens then? Like nothing. Right. It's a waste of time. So the sooner I can get people to identify like where their time vacuums are, the things that just suck their time and energy and attention out of their lives, and we can just cut off that leak, and then they start to have like, oh wait, I actually have presence and focus and now feel like I can get something done. I might need less entertainment or less booze. There's a lot of people I've encountered over the last 6 months. It's like they don't have their beer time anymore, right? Time when they were sitting around watching a game, having a 6-pack, that sort of thing, right, because they found a better way to invest their time, and they realized how much time they were like spending and just blowing. Like it's the same thing with money. Like time is like money, only it's more valuable. So if I can help you like shave down 10% of your expenses on your like finances, that's one thing. But if I can help you shave like 10% down on like bullshit you're doing with your time that's sucking your time, your energy out of you, that would otherwise allow you to be fulfilled and like vibrant and like have vitality, that's quite a contrast. So until people have that contrast, that comparison, that choice, I would argue they're just on the train tracks. And though the scenery is passing by, it's not having anything to do with their choice. It's just that they're hooked on to a train that's going someplace, and every place that you are on that track is usually not where you would want to be in life.
Right.
Most people feel like they're stuck on it.
So I guess the question people should ask themselves, whatever it is they're doing, viewing, whatever, is this adding any happiness to my life? Because I think a lot of people, especially in America, where they say we're one of the most unhappy nations in the world now, really have forgotten, how to be happy. Or that they're entitled to be happy because we get caught up in so much other bullcrap. So, maybe whatever it is, instead of saying, is this putting money in my pocket, people need to say, is this adding to my happiness?
Well, and let's take money out of the picture and just say that you're living a rural lifestyle. So happiness, satisfaction, meaning, all those things are kind of tied together. Success, if you're going to go off property, we can talk about success, but the other things really apply if you're just living a solitary lifestyle in a rural setting. The satisfaction comes from when it's windy and cold and rainy or snowy outside, that you have a roof over your head, you got a fire burning, you got some food in your belly, and it's all good. You can have a good night's sleep, right? The meaning and substance, that just comes from interacting in ways. You might be building a stone wall across part of your property, or putting up a fence, or patching a roof, right? That all has meaning and substance and value because you directly benefit from it. Now, if you take away that self-reliant, self-competent, and self-confident attitude, and you put people in the let's go to school for 15,000 hours, and then you can spin the wheel and see if you can get a job that you may or may not like, and it may or may not pay you long term, and you may or may not just get fired at any time, and then try to find happiness on this road where there's very little certainty, a whole bunch of things you have to figure out that you're not told about, but you already paid into a system that should have told you about these things, but you didn't get an education, you got schooled, right? So people were in the midst of like finding themselves like a couple years into a job after school, and they're like, why am I even working this job? I have no interest in this area. Oh, because these are the people that called me back after I put a bunch of resumes in stacks at the job fair, right? That's how people are letting their futures be determined. So the idea is to take a step back and learn that, first off, if you don't learn how to write your own script in life, how to write your own ticket in life, meaning giving yourself permission to do that which you want to do, pursue the interests you want to pursue, right? If you're not doing that, somebody else is going to do it for you. That's how it goes. People were writing a script in life. People find themselves halfway through their life and have a midlife crisis because they're like, oh, I never really made these choices. Now I'm becoming conscious of a bigger game. And then they feel like they lament that. My point would be it's never too late to start.
Exactly.
Because you invested part of your life and you've prostituted your time. You've spent it in frivolous ways, playing Fortnite or, watching House of Cards on Netflix. Those are my two cliche euphemisms for how people use, it's junk time. It's just like eating junk food. There's no nutritional value in it. It might feel good at the time, but it's not building your body. And it's probably taking away from your advantage that you could have in getting ahead. Right. So most people are always struggling and they can't. Well, here's the things that prevent people from making progress. If there's a way, if you have an issue or a problem, a challenge, if there's a result you'd like to attain that you don't have, or there's something you'd like to get rid of that you currently have, those are the two ways people spend money. If you don't have that situation, then you're in a state of happiness or success or whatever, because you're not wanting. You might be doing stuff, but overall you have your needs met, and all these other things are nice to haves, right? There's a lot of people that just struggle in trying to meet their needs, and they think they're too busy to learn their way out. I know what all their objections are, why they can make an excuse to stay in that situation. Right? They don't have time. Well, I understand that you don't know how to manage your time to get yourself out of that situation, right? So that's why you think you don't have time. But guess what? Everyone has the same number of hours in a week. So let's look at how you're investing your time, or are you spending it? Oh, look, you're spending a bunch of time. So once you talk people through the line of questioning that they should be having with themselves to get past that position, then it's you've had this race car and it's revving its engine and spinning its wheels, but I'm like, you got to take it off the jacks. You got to have the wheels make contact with the pavement, and then you're going to have to steer, right? Because you're going to be going really fast. So people are able to make breakthroughs pretty rapidly. And these breakthroughs have been waiting to happen, and for some of them, decades and decades.
Exactly.
And they've been, so there's all these ways that I've seen people break through these aspects, but first they have to get to the point where they're like, okay, the system I've been through really hasn't worked out to my advantage, and I'm ready to make a change. And then they decide to evaluate the market and search on YouTube and read books, and then they try to implement change that way. And for some people that works.
Right. Well,
I can do that stuff. You can do that stuff.
Right. Well, years ago, God, I was in my 30s. My oldest sister, I guess she had gotten sick and tired of me constantly telling her that I wish I would have done something with my art, because when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be an artist, and I was always drawing and whatnot. But then, of course, life came over me, and, I got stuck in the corporate world, sort of like you did. And one day, when I guess my sister was at a breaking point with me saying, I wish I had time to do something with my art, she said something very profound, and believe me, she's only given me 2 sentences of good advice in all her years of being on earth. She said to me, if you really want to do that, you'll find the time to do it. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, Richard. So I looked around at the local schools, the local high schools, to see what it is they were offering, any kind of classes or whatever, and I took an adult education watercolor class. A year later, I was making my living doing watercolors.
And how often do you paint now?
I got over it. I just don't. I succeeded. I made a good living. I had a one-woman show in Manhattan. A year later, I got great reviews, and then I said, okay, what's next? I mean, that's just the way I am. If I succeed at something, I want to do something else. I just feel I've transformed my art into the other things that I do. I see my radio show as a form of art. and I still enjoy it. So when I don't enjoy it anymore, I won't do it. But you were
Well,
talking
I
earlier
created,
about mainstream media, and I've had recently several people tell me they no longer will watch the news. All they need to do is listen to my news shows, and they know everything that's going on. And not just in America, because you know how I like to cover the whole planet.
well, I think it's a unique opportunity for people because if you take a break from the mainstream media or get people to understand there's a concept of, hey, take a break from mainstream media and then see what happens. And if you need news, Maria does a show once a week. You can pick it up there. You don't need it more often than that. You certainly don't need it every day. Like if there's something going on, you'll hear bells and whistles going off around you, and they'll be like, "Go this way."
Right.
Otherwise, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter.
No, well, I do them
And
twice
even
a
some of the
week.
stuff that the bells and whistles for don't matter.
Right. Well, I do them twice a week, and as people know, Richard, I cover the stuff that's never on mainstream media. The stuff that's really important, besides, Trump sucking the oxygen out of the room every day and the false narrative. I'm covering what no one is hearing because everybody's paying attention to the noise. Whether it's Fukushima, whether it's, offshore drilling, whether it's, Brunei and their horrible civil rights laws, or, whether it's Texas wanting to make women face the death penalty for abortion. These are not things that they're hearing in mainstream media. And for me, like I said earlier, I like to know everything that's going on because it all fits together. If you don't see all of it, you're not seeing any of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, people need to have a broader spectrum of intake on their information than just their favorite news channel.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a favorite news channel. I don't favor any channel for news. When I'm looking for news, it doesn't have a channel attached to it, And that's one of the advantages of using the internet. That's something called hyperlearning, being able to use the internet and direct your focus at learning something specific so that you can have a specific outcome come from that. So if you want to understand the news, then you need to collect from many, many different sources on any given different story, and then be able to contrast and compare in an analytical reading fashion that would allow you to sort out the signal from the noise such that you can sift away the noise. That's the contradictions, that's the fluff, that's the things that have claims that do not have ties to reality, and just focus on the signal, which is very simple because there's very little signal in most of that media transmission.
Absolutely.
Right? The signal would be the facts that are reflected in objective reality and are measurable and verifiable. And like I said, their journalism is no longer the 5 W's and how, which would provide you knowledge on a topic. Rather, they're just sending you word salads to hypnotize people into ideas about things that are misrepresentative from reality. So I think your observation skills are better. You should look at reality yourself and not through the lens of any type of mainstream media outlet, because it's always a carnival sideshow kind of mirror.
Absolutely. I mean, and now listen, I've been using the same trusted sources for the whole 19 years of my show. And for me, it's like a game. So I see it as an art form, being able to look at all of this, process it in my computer brain, and then spit it out for the reality it really is. Anyway, Rich, we need to take a short break. Stay with us. Rich and I will be right back. Hi, this is Meria. I don't often get to talk directly to the listeners here on the Gary Knoll Network, but I felt like doing that today. I know a lot of you really enjoy my show, but you might not know that I do 4 shows a week over at my website, meria.net. So if you're loving the show you get to hear on Sunday, come on over to my site and subscribe, because I've got hundreds of hours of great shows on pretty much every topic in the universe. And that again is meria.net, meria.net. And now we can get back to this excellent show. Thanks. Okay, welcome back to Tragedy and Hope with my guest, co-host, friend, smart guy, Richard Grove. If you're not familiar with his work, get over to tragedyandhope.com. And, of course, check out the link here for autonomy at the bottom of my page. Richard, let's talk a little bit about autonomy. I've been following it now for weeks. I love everything that you're teaching. And, of course, again, it makes me proud to see what a fabulous, effective teacher you have become. You went from a speaker and a smart guy to a fabulous, effective teacher. Autonomy. Why did you pick that name?
Autonomy means it's the notion of living a lifestyle of freedom, to live freely. So to have the skills to be able to not be dependent unless you want to be dependent, right?
Right.
So being able to go out in the world, and if you need money, it's not like, oh, I have to get a loan or I have to beg, borrow, whatever. It says, oh, I have skills. How shall I direct my skills and focus my skills and make an offer to somebody to transact? So I might have photography skills or video editing skills or labor skills or accounting skills or any type of skill set that you can offer out. Now, some skill sets are more readily put to use than others, right? If you only have a plumbing skill set, then you have to find somebody with a plumbing leak. But if you have a more general, what I call the Swiss Army knife for life skill set, right? It's not the optimal of any of these tools, but it's enough that if you just carry one tool, you can get through 85% of life situations without having to be any more specified or a more specified tool that you'd want to practice, right? So for most of the situations in life, the skills within the course are designed to add value in a way that helps people live a lifestyle of freedom and less doing things that they'd like to say no to. So ultimately, it teaches economic self-reliance, which is an aspect of freedom because you want to have the money to be able to say no to the things you don't want to do.
Right.
So that's a level of freedom. But also the intellectual aptitude, self-confidence, the competence, and the ability to get your needs met with other people through communication in a nonviolent freedom type of way, which for a lot of people is lacking these days. They get it through having emotional tantrums and throwing fits. And it's just like there's a lot of ill communication out there. So it just seemed logical to say, I understand the root cause of why people are in so much turmoil. And there's a whole bunch of history behind it. And I've produced a lot of content on that history and who did it and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. But really, it comes around to the solution. So there's a big problem of people trying to take away freedom across the planet. That's a big problem to deal with, not very well funded. And then there's a small problem, what I consider the smaller problem, the individual problem of too many people coming through school, going through university, coming out indentured and not knowing how to pay those bills and being mathematically locked into a situation they can never pay off with the skills they have. So the answer is you got to raise your level of skills. You got to get some high value skills that are liquid, that you can turn into cash in a couple days if you have these skills and needed to raise money for something, right? So it's a transformation from the metaphor would be a kite, which needs to have air, like a wind against it, to fly. And if there's no wind, it can't fly.
Right.
So in the employment world, it's like the wind. If you have a job, that's great. But if you get downsized, outsourced, get fired, what have you, you posted something on Facebook the company didn't like, now you're unemployed. There's no wind. I'm teaching people like, look, you have wings. You've never learned how to use them because the school system didn't want you to know how to use them, and it's threatening to the status quo for you to know how to fly around and direct your own path in life.
Right.
But there's a process, and for 100% of the people that I've worked with that have engaged in this process and tried, nobody has hit the ground and splatted yet. They've all learned to fly on their own, and they're pretty darn happy about it. So my question is always be like, I make the observation, like right now, the thing I'm teaching, they could teach you this in school. They could teach it at a very young age. We'd all have this skill. But why, they're not, which gives me an opportunity as an entrepreneur, but only in the face of they've had to ruin generation and generations of people's lives for us to get here to be like, there is an opportunity to fix this now with the technology we have and the information we have. And then seeing it in practice is a beautiful thing. So I've put a ton of time into the course over the past 9 weeks so far. But it's rewarding not only for me, but definitely for the people who participate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I love listening to it when I'm, doing all my other work on my computer. Just to hear your voice kind of makes my life a little easier. But re-listening to some of the things that I already knew is a good reminder. But it's also, you've got a lot of good people that you've got included in there. I believe I was listening to Mark Paseo. And I thought his thing was absolutely excellent. But it's as much as people want or don't want. And like I said, I'd rather know than not know. So here you are teaching people what's real, how to empower themselves, how to become independent. And, I have to think back. Your wife had asked me before the show how old I was, and tell her I understood her compliment, even though I forgot to say thank you. When I look at what's happened in just my lifetime, Richard, when I was a kid, let's pick out 1955, okay? Everybody in my neighborhood, and I grew up in the inner city, I grew up in Brooklyn, but everybody in the neighborhood's fathers had their own businesses. They didn't go to work for other people, okay? They were either plumbers, electricians, you had separate stores for everything you had to buy. So you couldn't get poultry in a butcher shop, okay? You had to go to the chicken store for that. You had a separate pork store. You had a fruit and vegetable store that was just your fruits and vegetables. They had a small store for sundries. We called them sundries. But everybody had pride. And then they came along and they convinced people, they seduced people into the job mentality. Come work for us. We'll give you good money. You'll get raises every 3 months. We'll give you free health care. We'll give you this, that. And all of that was in place. So it was easy to jump into that corporate seduction. And I did it. Believe me, I did it for many years, at least 25. But then one day, I realized the stress of it. The money was great, but I had no life. Okay. You talk about sleep. I didn't sleep. I spent most of my money, going to a chiropractor, trying to keep the stress levels in my body down. It was at that point that I said, well, I was married at the time, and I said to my husband, you know what? I want to take the summer off and see if I can make a living with my painting and with my counseling. Because we were married, it was only fair to ask him, because we shared expenses. And he said, okay. And that was 1985. And I never went back to work for anyone else.
Yeah, because a lot of people get caught into it. They're working to achieve dreams of somebody else and moving products that they have no heart in, right? If you're an insurance company, you're selling insurance, right? It's kind of boring. If you're selling software, if you're in one of these companies administrating any of those processes, it's not as meaningful and substantial as figuring out how to get to where you really want to go and accepting no counterfeits. Like, no, I won't take that corporate job. That's not where I want to be. Where I want to be is over here. I just don't know how to get here yet, but I'm going to figure that out, right? And so what I do with the course is it's like a smorgasbord or a buffet. So for someone like you, you're a little overwhelmed. You're like, how am I ever going to fit this on my plate? And I'm like, no, you just have to basically peruse the buffet, find what you're interested in. What are you lacking? Oh, you might, want some of this, and for your business, you could use the lectures coming up on marketing and a couple other things to at least become conversant. And then there's students in the course who are seeking to help you do these things that you want to do, because you have fans among your fellow students in autonomy. And so as you get to the parts where you're finding interest, then I can connect you with other students who are practicing aptitude in those areas or are already running their own businesses in those areas, and would love to have a testimonial from Meria Heller saying that, that person, that autonomy student, helped you do whatever you were trying to do as far as your, raising and elevating your revenue from your business. Right. You're 20 years into it this summer. I think it's time for it to start to really pay off for you. You've put the work in, you've built your reputation, but you're not, it's not limited to you. I could name 20 people in your situation who have amazing bodies of content, who have put in the work, have an excellent reputation, have a loyal audience that's looking for more. They want more freedom. They're not wanting less, but you just have a lacking of a couple entrepreneurial steps in there. And that's the whole thing. In America today, how can you run your own business? Because there's not enough people around that run their own business anymore to show you how these things can be done, let alone tell you what's possible on the internet and to show you how easy being an entrepreneur can be, because it doesn't mean starting from scratch and getting your own product. There's a whole bunch of other things that I teach about in the course. So whether they're on the employment track, track or trap. I don't know what that was supposed to
Both,
mean.
maybe both. Maybe it was a Freudian
Right.
slip.
Yeah, so if you're looking for employment, it's how to get a job, how to get raised, in addition to all the other high value skills and culture of excellence that you would bring to that situation. But if you're on the entrepreneur path, there are basic ingredients to having a successful business, especially a successful online business these days. And most people are missing 2 or 3 of these ingredients. They've got 6 or 7 of them. And if you just help them identify what they need and show them how to get it, and they can do it themselves, or they can have somebody volunteer, or admin, or intern. That was the word I was looking for experience, because people are looking for experience. They're looking for references. So there's an intermingling. That's a networking aspect of the autonomy course, is the community of students working together to help solve problems, to elevate each other up, to share networking opportunities, job opportunities, all sorts of things that aren't possible with a standard traditional just take an online course and hope it works for you.
The rest of the world, they don't believe in, people helping people. It's work for us. And I'm sure you got to the same point too that I did, all those years ago, where, people are only realizing now that the tremendous disparity between what a CEO of a company makes and what the workers are making, the people that actually do the work. But, there I was, in my 30s, and I realized that I had been working really hard with all my great skills to make my bosses rich, and I was getting the smallest piece of the pie. And I refused to keep making someone else rich on my back.
Well, there was a quote a couple lectures ago that I used from Guy Ritchie, and basically he's observing all these different myths over time, and he says one of the general themes of these myths is that you have to go out into the world and prostitute yourself and your skills and experience, and talent in order to understand your true value. So you go off, you work for a corporation, you're prostituting yourself, they're getting a lot of value, you're getting a paycheck, and then at some point, like in my case, if I'm bringing in 100% of the money and you're paying me 20%, then why can't, and this is the thing you guys can't do, why don't I just have my own business and do that for myself then?
Exactly.
Right? And so I had skills such that they could have a company with development and marketing and all sorts of things, but without the person to communicate the value to potential clients and get them to transact, they have no business. There is no income. Mm-hmm. So, if you attain what I call an indispensable skill set, you'll never be wanting for work or lacking in your ability to have the vision to see how you could apply your skills on your own. And this is something that, I joke and say, if you could fill a car with gas, you could pick up the skills you need to make $100K a year. Like, it's not that hard. It's just not being organized and offered, and people aren't being given a place to practice. That's the most essential part, right. Where they work through their fears, they refine, and they gain confidence through competence, and then they're ready to go out in the world and fly on their own, right. And come back to the nest whenever they want to visit.
Right, but going back to 1955, everybody in the neighborhood had pride. They had pride in what they did. They loved what they were doing. They were friendly because they enjoyed showing off their produce or whatever it was that they had fresh that day. People right. used to comment, my father used to have to take a bus to go to work at his barbershop, but my father wore a suit and tie to go to work. This is the kind of world that it used to be. And you look at today where, everybody's still begging for a raise in minimum wage. And it's like, there's something seriously wrong with this picture, and this is all in one person's lifetime. I've lived through it. I've seen it myself. And it's shocking to me how fast this type of mentality has spread.
It's not shocking to me because it's like seeing a wildfire spread after seeing pine needles dry out for 30 years. It's like any spark's going to set that off. And the pine needles that are all dried out in this metaphor would be people graduating from public schooling and then going unwittingly into, working at these the fewer and fewer multinational conglomerates that are out there. Whether it's in the public sector, the defense sector, or the government sector, they're all intersectoring. Right, and that's what fascism really is. It's a united bond between the corporations and government, such that it's indistinguishable. That would be like the usually Mussolini term for fascism. If you go back to the Roman term, it comes from the fasces, which is bundling a bunch of sticks together with an axe.
Right.
So, there's some stuff, and that's what's under Lincoln's hands on the Lincoln Memorial. His hands are resting on two fasces, and that's how government is now. That's not Lincoln's philosophy. It's the people who paid for the monument who get to depict that thing, right? So just because they attribute it to Lincoln or Washington, whoever, doesn't mean that those people were actually advocating those aspects, because they were dead when those things happened. They didn't do those things while they were alive, right?
Right.
Those statues.
Right. Well, it kind of reminds me of Aaron Russo's film, Freedom or Fascism. And, this has been a topic, forever in this country. But, people can also look at, besides, the political form of fascism, is to put it in their own lives. Are you going to have freedom or fascism in your own life?
I think we need to do America fascism to freedom. I think,
Well, maybe you could put that on. Maybe you could put that on your work list, since you don't work hard enough.
Yeah, right. I'm very hesitant to add to any future projects until I get all the ones on the burners.
I don't blame you. I mean, the amount of work that you've put into this course, autonomy, is amazing. I mean, how long did it take you to put all of this together, Rich?
Well, for the content itself, it took about 10 years plus whatever experience that I had in the corporate world prior to that. So, I had experience, and then I started thinking about the curriculum around 2008. And I made a podcast about it called Parrhesia, the need for a conscious, comprehensive curriculum. Parrhesia means to speak freely. So I was basically saying, look, there's a lot of things that are messed up, but if we're going to solve it, here are the things they took out to make the problems. My hypothesis is, it's like if they took pieces out of your motor in your car, your engine, and it's not running. I'm like, hey, if we put those pieces back in, guess what? The motor still runs. The engine runs if you put the pieces back. So all I'm doing is putting those pieces back and souping up the engine a little bit, right? Giving some superhero skills that people, like a superhero skill, listening, the ability to listen. A lot of people think they're good listeners until you get into the course, and then you find out, oh, geez, I do a lot of talking. I should do more listening and asking of thoughtful questions. I'll have better conversations with people, but people will better enjoy my company, right? So one of the things we teach people how to do in the course is just how to have a basic casual conversation that actually has substance and meaning and helps people and adds value to their lives. Because my argument is, if you can learn how to do that, and anybody can learn how to do that, there's a variety of ways that you can use that skill to pay your bills. There's a variety of high value skill sets that all revolve around being able to just have a simple conversation where you ask some thoughtful questions and you listen to the responses and you do some thinking and you move the ball forward for them, right? Instead of just leaving them with, hey, nice to hear your complaints. Have a good day. Glad to see it's not raining,
Right.
Instead of having trivial, superficial conversations all the time with people, you can be having substantial conversations with people, not everybody, but you'll at least be seeing who else is conscious out there and who's looking to, like, okay, we all recognize some things suck. Who's sick of it and wants to transcend this situation? Because everybody else is just happy with it. They're like, the uncomfortableness I know is more comforting to me than this, the thought of being free and successful, because I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not familiar with that yet, right? So for some people, it takes longer than others. But as you see in the course, you go along at your own pace. But what I would say is, once we get you in the dynamic learning environment on Discord and you start to have these conversations, because you're already good at it, right? So this is inspiring to other people.
Oh, yeah.
But I think you would also draw a lot of value from the interactions in the community aspect, because some of the things you're struggling with as a business owner, there's a number of other people struggling with the same thing, and you guys are all in the midst of learning how to solve those issues and elevate above where you are now.
Well, I absolutely look forward to it, Rich. I'm enjoying so much of it now. Some people might look and say, geez, that looks pretty expensive. But, I had a news report this week that millennials today are so burdened with student loans that they can't save up enough of a down payment to buy a house. So when you look at what they're paying for what's called an education, of which is not preparing them for anything, it really isn't that expensive. Wouldn't it be great if they skipped college and just took your classes?
Well, that would be advantageous all around. And what I can say is, my course is expensive because it's much more valuable than the expense. So it's a fraction of what it's really valuable and it's worth in your life. But yeah, for a lot of people, it seems expensive. So what else is expensive? Ignorance is pretty expensive. spending your time and money on liabilities all the time, that seems pretty expensive. Like, and it's definitely creating problems and leaving people without plans. So from a price perspective, there's a couple different package levels. So it's not just locked into the $10,000 package. There's a variety of packages that are suited to need. I won't make it smaller than it will work.
Right.
So there's going to be a lower level package. You'll still be able to get the benefits you need out of it. Some people need added features and functionality and consulting time and more hand holding. But for people that are just like at less than zero and trying to get back to square one and get on to square two, I'll have, there are packages that are, but you find out about this through the enrollment call. So we don't like to just tell people, figure it out and buy it yourself.
Right.
We like to talk to people before they come in the course, figure out what they're trying to do, how we can add value to their situation, and then help them identify how to take a next step forward.
So how do they get on that enrollment call? What do they have to do?
Anybody who's interested should just email Meria at meria.net. And then I'll give you the spreadsheet that has a list of students who are happy to do enrollment calls and help people find where they're going, because they relate. They're students. They just did this 10 weeks ago. And there's people in there from anywhere from one of the students graduated from MIT to there's people who are 19 or 20 years old that are either in college or not in college and dropped out of high school. So there's a whole spectrum of diverse people with varying levels of experience that are all seeking the same key aspects that are missing from their daily activities and their interactions.
Right.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, that's the best thing anybody 19 or 20 could invest in, because it'll take them through the rest of their lives and they won't have to start and stumble like most of us in my age group did. It took
it's like giving them a motor for their sailboat. They don't have to wait for the wind. They can direct their own course.
Exactly. Well, Rich, thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll talk soon for sure.
Thank you so much, Meria, and thank you all.
Always a pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Bye now.
Richard Grove, check him out at tragedyandhope.com. Check out Autonomy. You got nothing to lose and everything to gain. I am blown away by what this man can do. It's like, wow. I can't even imagine where he'll be 10 years from now. Anyway, thanks for enjoying and listening to the show and supporting the show. I love every one of you that support the show. And I'm going to learn how to network to make sure other people recommend the show to other people so I can continue to do the show. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow with the real news. And as one person once called it, you only person I know that sees the news with spiritual views. So again, thanks for listening. See you guys next time.
Thank you for listening and supporting The Meria Show. Tell others what you learned today. Knowledge becomes wisdom only when it's shared. Encourage others to subscribe today. www.meria.net. Often imitated, never duplicated. A world of information all in one place. www.meria.net. Always ahead of the curve. Always on your side. Get active or get radioactive. Subscribe today.